What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Processing Blue, where, yes, we process blue for you. I'm Alex Zietlow. I am joined by Mike Kaye, and we cover the Carolina Panthers for the Charlotte Observer. And if you are watching us on YouTube, you can tell that Mike is on the road again. Mike, how's your pro day tour going? Are you having fun?
Yeah, I mean, other than the poorly lit hotel rooms, it's been a pretty successful pro day tour. Right now, we're recording this on Tuesday, so I've been to South Carolina, UNC, and then Duke, and then today I will go and watch NC State, then go to Wake Forest, and then I'll close out in Charlotte. So looking forward to that. Really impressed by the Duke group, like really impressed. And I think they have some fits for this Panthers team.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later because we do have a great show for you today. It's another week of going over some more Carolina Panthers roster additions during a very hectic free agency. We'll also soon be joined by Carolina Panthers inside linebacker Claudin Cherelus, who is just a delight. Um, but first, Mike, let's talk about something a bit more big picture. Dan Morgan told us that he feels as if the work the front office has done during free agency kind of freed up the Panthers to allow them to draft the best player available instead of having to draft around immediate needs. And whether you agree with that or not, or however you define, quote, best player available, it's all good. The thing is, the Panthers still have some needs and they still have some immediate needs. And so I wanted to ask you, for yourself, what is the Panthers' biggest draft need right now?
An Ashawn Robinson replacement. You don't just cut the number 2 defensive lineman and then say, "Hey, guys that were here, let's give you better and bigger roles," right? And I think one of the problems that they had last year was Turk Warden probably played a little too much and was kind of used out of position at times. I think Bobby Brown played a little too much and played out of position at times. They relied on LeBron Ray, who's best fit as a rotational player. They still don't know what they have in Cam Jackson. I know Dan Morgan's pretty excited about him. He had mentioned that multiple times during my conversation with him in Frisco, Texas in January. And they have Jared Harrison Hunt, who is still awaiting his first regular season snaps. I just think they desperately need a guy who can get up the field, but also play the run in the trenches. And um, while cutting Ashawn for a $10.5 million savings was the absolute rate and only move they could really make, they are going to have to make up for that production. And while I think some of that'll come in the upgrades at outside linebacker and inside linebacker, I still think they really do need to draft for interior defensive line, whether it's in the first round, the second round, third round, or beyond. They need to scratch that itch. Alex, what do you think is their most pressing need entering the draft?
I think it's safety. Um, and to be clear, I don't necessarily think that the Panthers should spend a first round pick on a safety. I think that'll become more clear as we get closer and closer to the draft. I am actually really on the bandwagon of the Panthers, perhaps drafting an offensive tackle in the first round, a succession plan for Taylor Moton. We don't know what's going to happen with Ike Ekwonu this year. And hey, Joe Gilbert was at Clemson's pro day looking at, Blake Miller, perhaps, who's a first round offensive tackle talent projection. So that could be a thing. But when it comes to immediate needs right now, the Panthers could really use a plan at safety. They obviously re-signed Nick Scott to a one-year deal this offseason. Trayvon Merrick is still under contract. Lathan Ransom is under his rookie deal. And Damani Richardson just signed a futures contract. Shout out Damani. Uh, but like they need another plan. Nick Scott played so many snaps for such little value such little salary last year that he was eligible and earned a performance-based pay bump from the NFL. Which goes to show that yes, you're getting a lot of mileage out of your defensive backfield, but also that you could probably you have some room to spend at safety too. So I think that's where it is. Again, is it a first-round name like Ohio State's Caleb Downs? I don't know. He seems to be a generational talent, according to draft experts. Is it Oregon's Dylan Thieneman? That's another name that comes up a lot when you think of first-round guys. Or is it some guys that you've seen on the road, like a Jalen Kilgore out of USC, out of the South Carolina Gamecocks? We'll talk about him a little bit later, but there are like good prospects at safety this draft, and I think Dan Morgan would be smart to go after one, whether that be day 2 or day 3. Um, Mike, do you have anything to add about the safety aspect, or should we move on to our next segment?
No, I completely agree with you. If I didn't pick interior defensive line, I would have picked safety. I mean, I think I just went with interior defensive line from a value standpoint, but like
Mm.
really, when you look at it, there is a glaring need for an upgraded safety, and I think you're spot on.
Want to talk Andy Dalton?
Let's do it always.
Well, literally, as we're recording this podcast, the trade became official that Andy Dalton, the 38-year-old quarterback, got traded to the Eagles for a 2027 seventh-round pick. The move opened up 2.15 million in cap space, according to Over the Cap. That now leaves the quarterback depth chart for the Panthers at Bryce Young as QB1 and Kenny Pickett as QB2. Mike, your first thoughts?
I think they really made this evident. This was going to be the move.
Mm.
Now, I know Dan Morgan said that Andy was willing to compete, but the second you spend $4 million with heavy incentives on Kenny Pickett, who is not a considerably better player at the moment, but is considerably more mobile and athletic, I think the writing was on the wall. They were going to move him. There's an argument to be made that they could have saved $4 million after June, but I think the well would have dried up from a suitor standpoint because of the draft and people spending draft capital on prospects, potentially backups or long-term developmental players. And it might have hindered the Panthers' leverage in drafting a late round quarterback, which they've discussed that they want to get younger and cheaper behind Bryce Young. And so I think now is the time to do it. I think a 2027 seventh round pick is fair considering that they opened up 2.15 million in cap space. And when you're handing out these big deals to Devin Lloyd and Jalen Phillips, any little bit of cap space helps. And that's the way I would look at this trade. Is this was about opening up cap space, opening up a roster spot, and not completely, you know, tying a cinder block around your leverage and singing it to the bottom of the ocean. Like, that's what this was. This was a clean break. They'll go into the offseason program with Kenny Pickett and Bryce Young established in their roles, and they can move from there. And then they can also invest in a young quarterback to develop behind those two guys. What do you think?
Well, it sounds like you like it.
I like it. I don't love it.
Cool. Um, the thing that is most interesting to me, or the thing that I'm going to be looking closely at with this, is how the dynamics of Kenny Pickett and Bryce Young are different than the dynamics between Andy Dalton and Bryce Young. Obviously, Bryce, when he first came into the league, had a veteran presence who he could ask questions to, but also someone who wasn't going to outwardly be a competitor. Like, I think I wasn't here necessarily as a reporter, but I think in his earliest days in Carolina, Andy Dalton was like, "Hey, I'm here to foster the next quarterback. I'm here to like teach Bryce how to become a professional. I'm here to teach him." He gave him advice from everything to scheme to how to run a foundation when you're starting in the league. So um, that dynamic will change a little bit. Kenny Pickett has received flying colors when it comes to being a really good teammate, a really good person in a quarterback room. But this does change things slightly. And the Panthers are essentially signaling to Bryce Young, as we've said, that, hey, no more, n- we're no longer putting the kid clothes on you, or whatever the proper phrase is. This is your team. You are the leader of this. Go out and do it. And so I think that's really captivating.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, when you're entering your fourth season, you're essentially a veteran. Like, you've experienced the highs and lows of the league, and he has truly experienced the highs and lows of the league.
Hmm.
He's taken the team to the playoffs. He's been benched. He's gone through a 2-win season. He's had a massive rebound and back to second half rebound in back-to-back seasons. So I think it made sense. I'm not in love with the Kenny Pickett signing. I think it's fine. Mobility is very clearly at the top of their list because it certainly isn't arm strength or accuracy or what have you. I think they have made this clear that at worst, they want to be able to mimic Bryce Young's mobility if there is an injury or needs to be a fill-in. And Kenny Pickett, by all measures, can solve that issue. I think this doesn't behoove them from drafting a quarterback, the signing or the trade. If anything, I actually think that future seventh round pick is very similar to the Adam Thielen deal, where they are prolonging the value of a guy who's going to have a contract that expires this year. So his contract will expire before they even use that asset, unless they use it in a trade this year or what have you. Similar to Thielen with the mix and match trades, they're enhancing his contract value with a cheaper deal that extends, and now they get a cheap 4-year deal basically out of trading Andy Dalton if everything works out. And so I think, let's say they're in the 6th round and they want to trade up and get a quarterback, well, they can use that future 7th round pick to help them accomplish that mission and trade up. So I I mean, it's a shrewd move. You still kind of are like, well, if Pickett's the answer, it's kind of like, okay, cool, whatever. But I think for them, this made a lot of sense. And ultimately, if Andy Dalton gets to finish his career with like a Super Bowl contender, I think that's pretty productive for him as well.
Yeah, that would be great for Andy. All right, as promised, let's kick it to our interview with Claudin Cherelus.
And we are joined by Panthers linebacker and special teams standout Claudin Cherelus, or as I like to call him, Claude. How's it going?
I'm good, and yourself?
Can't complain. Just another day with processing blue. And something I wanted to process with you, your first foray into free agency, what was that like? You didn't sign immediately, but you ended up coming back. Why was it important that you came back? But what was the experience like overall?
Uh, yeah, I ain't gonna lie. It was different, man. It was kind of like I try not to let stuff be stressful, but it was like at the end of the day, this is what I do. So, just making sure everything was in line. But at the end of the day, from the jump, I told my agent that I wanted to be back, and I'm glad we made that happen.
When you say it was stressful, you're a player who has gone through a lot of stressful situations in your career, at least from a perspective of having to relocate
Yeah.
a couple times, really in really quick succession. How did your free agency experience compare to your honestly your path coming to Carolina?
Uh, it was kind of similar, but it was kind of like a different point of view. Because it was like, okay, I know I'm wanted, versus before it was like I'm gonna shoot my shot, I'm gonna do everything I can to be wanted, to get myself the opportunity. And now it's like, okay, well, I'm wanted in this league. I've put stuff on tape that, you know, gave me some value to bring to, whoever. So it was that was the only difference. That was the main difference between everything.
I saw this clip of new Texans safety Reed Blankenship. He was coming
Yeah.
from the Eagles, won a Super Bowl there. Also a former undrafted free agent, where he said something to the effect of it was the first time he really felt wanted, his first foray into free agency. Like teams were trying to get him as
Yeah.
opposed to him trying to impress teams. And, you had said this was a little bit different in that you knew that you were wanted for a pro athlete who has been through what you've been through, switching schools, being at a small school, going to the Jets, getting waived, getting claimed off waivers. What can that do for your motivation, for your just overall mentality entering the season?
Dog, it's everything, man. Just knowing that, these teams are going out and looking like, okay, well, I want him, or not even just a team like a coach, just in life in general, knowing that, okay, somebody has broke it down, somebody is getting to know you as a player in person, and they're going to the table saying, we need him, we want him. It's just a good feeling. So it's similar to college. When I transferred, I wanted to go somewhere, that wanted me and needed me, at the same time. So and that's how I ended up at Alcorn.
You mentioned that you wanted to be back in Carolina. What were those reasons? Why?
Uh for starters, stability really. you know, uh, just going through what we've been through since 23 with that staff, the ups and downs, the highs and lows. And a lot of people don't know this, but I never had the same position or coordinator coach back to back years in my life before I got to the league in Carolina.
Mm, mm.
And that's just everything. Being able to come back and the system, you're familiar with stuff. Obviously, things change. You make some adjustments, but the root stays the same, so that was pretty big for me.
Mm.
Claude, they bring in Devin Lloyd in free agency, and that was before you had initially agreed. What did you make of that signing? What do you think he can bring to the room?
Competition, a guy that obviously, he did it last year. He was all pro player. Um, you know, um, I like his film. I like his play style. Me and Devin actually met at the soccer game. Um, I think this was the day after I signed. So, just talking to him, the mindset is there, everything you would want in a player and a person, and I think he's just going to elevate the defense, the room, and the team as a whole, really. So I'm looking
And
forward to it.
oh, sorry. And if I could follow up, like how important, especially in that inside linebacker room where there are two starters and there are two of you playing pretty consistently, how important is it for the vibes to be right, for you guys to have that camaraderie, to have that experience early, to get that type of chemistry going?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's major. It's just something that people don't take into account. You can't just get guys from every which way, everywhere, and just put them in one room and be like, okay, you guys got to work out. Like, yeah, at the end of the day, that's what it is. But everything is easier when you guys gel together. When you guys are, hanging out outside of the building, you guys can have normal conversation. So now you get to learning. Okay, this is how we gonna converse. This is, this it's second nature. Some stuff, obviously you communicate, but some stuff, okay, I know how he's thinking, and he's next to me, so I'm more comfortable. And we're the two guys, set in the front, communicating with the back end. So it just makes everything much more smooth.
Claude, do you go to a lot of Charlotte FC games?
I've been to a couple. I enjoy them though, but this year was my first one.
Mhm.
When I met Devin, but I've been to a couple. I enjoy the vibes there.
Are you a soccer fan in general? Like, do you like the sport, or was it kind of just for the spectacle
Yeah,
and also meeting
I
Devin?
mean, I like the sport. I'll go watch it any day of the week. I wouldn't say I keep up consistently, but that's also with a lot of other sports like basketball. I used to watch it all the time, and it kind of like once I got to the league, it's like I'm not keeping up with any other sport like consistently besides the one I'm in.
Yeah, nah,
It's
that's fair.
tough.
Yeah, no, I could imagine. You mentioned needing camaraderie in the linebacker room to like for the defense to see its full potential.
Yeah.
What have you seen? I wanted to talk about Trevin Wallace. What have you seen from him as he's grown in the league? How have you gotten close to him over the past couple of years? Just anything that you can tell me about Trevin.
Like you mentioned, growth. Obviously you come in as a third round pick. You're a high draft pick, and the situation he was in his first year, you had to learn fast. You don't have time really, and that's what this league is, obviously. But just how much information he can retain at one time. Me and Trev talk a lot of ball. We That's my brother. I spent Thanksgiving at his family's house, so that's my people. But um, that's the biggest thing, the athletic ability, that's natural to him. He's a freak athlete. There's not much people in the league, let alone in general at that size that can move like that. Just being able to learn stuff so fast, see something once and, he, kind of sticks with him. and I pay attention to a lot of that with Trev. We talk a lot about, like I said, but that's the biggest thing, like, because at that age, like, I know for a fact I wouldn't have been able to learn stuff as fast as young as he is, how he's learning.
Mm. No.
But I'm in the middle of a pro day tour, and I'm going to 6 schools over the last 2 weeks in the Carolinas. I'm just curious, what do you remember about your pro day, and how do you think that helped you kind of get noticed? I know you went undrafted, but how do you think that ended up helping you become a priority free agent for the Jets and signing, and then eventually getting claimed off of waivers?
Yeah, pro day was everything. All the nerves was definitely there because you train 3 months, 3 4 months, for one day, one moment. You got 240s, you got 2 reps of everything. So all I remember is just going in like that whole week. I had landed. I actually had it at Jackson State. The year Dion had left, and I think there was 27 schools in attendance. With a joint pro day, and all I was thinking is, these got to be my best numbers. I gotta run fast. I gotta jump high, broad jump, do this, but I got to look smooth in individual drills. And that was the biggest thing, my 40 and drills. And my pro day was crazy because I wasn't running for like maybe 2 weeks before my pro day. I bruised my hip, and after I ran my first 40, I heard some certain numbers, and I was like, "Damn, like I'm that slow." Like I called my agent. I was like, "There's no way I'm that slow." I was like, "There's no way." But I hadn't ran a full 40 in maybe 3 4 weeks. In the times that I had, I was already running with the soft tissue injury. Um, so fast forward, now I got the real numbers. I was like, okay, this sounds a little better. Um, but then the drills was the biggest thing. That's what we was focused on, looking smooth in front of all the teams. And I think did a good job of capitalize on that. And yeah, because after before pro day, I think maybe had spoke to one team, and after pro day, I spoke to at least I got on my phone at least 12 that week. So just it's everything. Especially guys, coming from smaller schools. The numbers are gonna pop first, and then they're gonna cut on the tape.
Claude, what was your favorite pro day drill?
Uh, I'm a vertical guy. I ain't gonna lie. Like, I wanted to show off the vertical. I thought I had a 40 in me. I'm listen. I feel like I got the 40. They moved me down a little bit. We're not gonna talk about that, but yeah, I wanted to break that 40 in the vert. That was just, everyone surrounding you, everyone get hype, and you just go. And then obviously my 40, I ran between the high 4.4s and the low 4.5s. So, that was obviously something that popped too.
I
Awesome.
guess I guess we have a couple more questions, one from me and one from Alex, but you're entering your 4th year. What's the biggest thing you want to improve on entering this season? And then on top of that, who's like the guy you go to break down film with, like in the locker room you want to study with, or that you ask questions to, or maybe you lean on when you have a bad play or a bad game, or you get some type of feedback? Who is the guy you lean on during the season that's going to help you get to that next level?
Yeah, starters, obviously, I want to improve every aspect of my game where I lacked. Obviously, I think coverage is one thing that stood out for me in general, just because I know, you know, I can be way better in coverage. This wasn't my best, obviously. And it comes with getting the feel for it. It comes with reps, just zone coverage, drop, stuff like that. I don't want to get too much detail, but on top of that, film breakdown, I kind of take a different approach. Like I said, me and Trev talk a lot. So me and Trev will talk, but I will also go around the room to, the younger guys, whoever the older guys, and just I want to see how you're seeing it also. I don't want to just talk to one person and be like, okay, yeah, this is the correction. That's easy. No, I want to see how everyone sees it different. And then, we talk about it too. So, everyone's learning from each other's mistakes. So, I wouldn't say there's one guy. I kind of treat it as a room thing, and uh, it's crazy. I'm the vet of the room now, and well, me and Devin, we're the two holders at 27. So yeah, I mean, guys come up to me too. So that's what it is right now.
And Claude, this is less about you as a football player, and more about you as a person. But I noticed when you first arrived to Charlotte, you had the Haitian flag on your helmet.
Yeah.
I know you've spoken about this a bit before, but why is representing your family and your Haitian roots important to you?
Just because it's just hardworking people. That's the root of us. Just coming from grit, coming from nothing, earning everything we have, and there's not much of us at this level. There's not much of us playing pro sports because it's not first nature over there. And I'm from Florida, but both my parents were born there. Majority of my family is there, so I carried on like I was born there and raised my whole life. Just to you know motivate the next kid that didn't grow up doing it, didn't grow up playing. I didn't grow up you know playing sports my whole life. I started in eighth grade and you know worked my way up like all other Haitians would and had to. So just seeing that flag representing, putting it on my helmet just means a lot to me. That was one thing I really was like, okay, I gotta get the flag on my helmet. I gotta get the flag on my helmet. I gotta rep. So yeah, it's everything to me.
Well, Claude, we really appreciate you joining us on the Processing Blue podcast. This has been a fun interview. I'm glad we got to get to know you a little bit more, and the fan base got to know you a little bit more. We're going to be looking forward to watching you in camp and beyond this offseason.
Well, Mike, I appreciate it. Alex, I appreciate you. Glad to be back. Like I said, good to be working with you guys again and keep pounding.
All right. Well, that was a great discussion with Claude, and really thoughtful about his journey, and about how he can, contribute to the Panthers next year, Mike.
Yeah, I really appreciated a lot of your questions. I kind of tend to wing it a little bit with the guys that I know, but I think um, what you brought to the conversation was something deeper, and I always appreciate whoop, as my phone falls, I always appreciate that kind of with your interview style. But enough about you. Let's talk about some other roster moves that the Panthers have made because I think there's different ways of interpreting the 3 moves they made last week that we didn't really get to discuss. They signed AJ Dillon. They brought back Felipe Franks after a 1-year exodus to the house that Bryce Young built. And then they signed an App State alum in Nick Hampton. So when we go through this group, you automatically know that they're going to be depth, but they're going to be depth in different ways. How do you want to break this down? Because you're the hostess with the mostest. How should we handle this? How should we attack this?
Let's just go through each one really quickly and see how they impact the roster. And obviously, they'll impact the roster in a variety of ways. But let's start with AJ Dillon,
Okay.
because I think when Carolina Panthers fans and followers or whoever see Carolina Panthers have signed another running back, particularly after the exit of Rico Dowdle, minds go a variety of different places, and I think it's worth having this perspective right now. So, Mike, when you first saw the news, first saw the tweet, or first saw you got a text or whatever, what did you think about AJ Dillon coming to Carolina?
Well, one, I think he makes sense from a short yardage perspective. As we know, it's been highly publicized. They do not want to run QB sneaks. They ran the Mitchell Evans or I call it the Mitchell mover. I think they tried to run it a couple of times. I think they only successfully ran it once, like actually ran it. Whoa, we got some activity picking up here in Cary.
Hey, Cary, North Carolina, shout out.
Yeah, hey, I went to the Outback last night. Wonderful. Lovely. Just a lovely place. Anyway, I've talked about it multiple times. I thought they could use the Rico Dowdle strategy with signing a guy who's at a low cost with incentives that if Jonathan Brooks, who right now has to be house money, doesn't work out, then you have another guy with experience who's shown it on film. AJ's kind of below that tier in that he was really, I mean, he was out for a year with a neck injury, then played for the Eagles last year and was a healthy scratch for half the season because he didn't play on special teams and was outperformed by Clemson alum Will Shipley and former Jacksonville Jaguar Tank Bigsby, who was traded like the first month of the season. So I would look at this as a role upside signing. I don't know that he is a guy that I would consider anything more than maybe the Hunter Renfrow
Mm,
of the offseason, and I feel like we've made too many Hunter Renfrow references in the last 2 weeks. But, like, this is hey, if this works out, terrific. If it doesn't, it's not a big deal. And I think fans they love the idea of a bruising running back. Sure, but if he can't do much else, like, he's a decent blocker, I think, and so maybe he can establish a third down role. But I really think that if everything works out, Jonathan Brooks is gonna be a heavy part of this offense. They feel good about Chuba. They feel good about Trevor Etienne, although I don't know what his role is gonna be. Um, I just think this is depth. Like, they have 2 other guys in the room that are practice squad level players that will hopefully push for more playing time, but they needed somebody in that room that was experienced. And who knows, maybe they'll draft another guy on day 3.
yeah. It is interesting to see where AJ Dillon is gonna, like, figure into all this because, like you said, those those 3 guys are Dave Canales has proven that you can only give the ball to so many guys, and it kind of becomes a headache to try to manage all these players, particularly if all of them want touches like they do. And I think a lot of people are like, initially they figured that AJ Dillon could be effectively a Rico Dowdle production replacement, and he he just it's hard to imagine that he would because in 2021 was his first year of over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. That was 5 years ago at this point. AJ Dillon had major injury history. Rico Dowdle doesn't. So, or didn't, and hopefully still doesn't. But anyway, that's enough about AJ Dillon. I think we'll be talking about him more as this goes on. Mike, do you want to talk about Felipe Franks real quick?
Yeah, because I do think he directly impacts AJ Dillon, oddly enough. The Panthers have kept 4 tight ends the last 2 seasons. James Mitchell was a healthy and active for most of the season. Felipe Franks, the year before that, was a special teams ace. I think from their perspective, like, this plays an interesting factor into the roster math, right? Because we've talked about having a third quarterback potentially. You know that they're wide receiver hungry. They could keep anywhere from 5 to 7 wide receivers. Do they keep 4 to 5 tight ends? We know they like James Mitchell. He's back, but who knows? Jatavian Sanders is coming off an ankle injury. Dan Morgan told us that he should be good for the offseason program, but he had a pretty big setback year last year. So, and by the way, Tommy Tremble had $2 million of his base salary guaranteed earlier this month. So, like, there's a lot of factors in there. And plus, I know they're doing a lot of research on the draft class, and I think they will try to upgrade the pass catching production at tight end during draft weekend. So there's a lot factored in. Dan Morgan's been very aggressive about setting up competition there. But Franks is a guy, you talk to J.J. Jansen, you talk to Tracy Smith, you talk to other guys on special teams. They adore this dude because he is, for a lack of a better term, nuts when it comes to special teams, like in coverage. And we do the poll every year where we go around the locker room and we ask guys for their offensive, defensive, and special teams MVPs. And Felipe was the special teams MVP of the 2024 season. Like, whether you factor that in is meaningful or not, I mean, the players speak for that and they play on special teams, and that's a vote that some guys take pretty seriously. So I think it's a great move. I love it if we were doing our thing, but we're not, which was my fault. But yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. What do you think?
Oh, I don't have anything to add either. I think Felipe Franks' story is really interesting. If there's one guy, I mean, if there's one guy on the team that I could just walk up to in the locker room and do a profile on, it would probably be him. Because like you said, he's mad interesting. His path to where he is now is mad interesting. Obviously, tr being a quarterback initially, in college, and I just think that's cool. Alright, real quick, Nick Hampton, what do you think, Mike?
He's basically here to be the Felipe Franks of competition at outside linebacker. Like he'll push Thomas Incoom, he'll push Travis Gibson. I think Incoom's a guy that this staff loves, so I would be surprised if he came at the cost uh, of Thomas Incoom. But Travis Gibson, maybe he becomes trade bait if Hampton shows up and plays well. He has a little bit of history with AC Carter, who was in Los Angeles when he was there, but he was there for 3 years, so he doesn't have a relationship with Cooley or EJ, at least playing wise. And so it'll be interesting. I think he's going to just be a special teams ace. Like that's really where he'd factor in. I still think they're going to draft an edge rusher in the draft class. So if you do the math there, that's Jalen Phillips, Nick Scordon, Princely Umanmielen, Pat Jones, Thomas Incoom, 5 right there.
Mhm.
Travis Gibson, Nick Hampton, and then a draft. Like the competition's going to be fierce this summer, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And speaking of the draft, Mike, let's talk about this pro day tour of yours just real quick before we get on out of here. You mentioned that you're in Cary, and most people are like, "Yo, what college is in Cary?" Well, fun fact, Cary is in the Research Triangle area, and that is where UNC, Duke, and NC State all are. And you hit all 3 of those pro days this week. Um, so okay, just a couple players that stuck out to you, a couple, I don't know, programs that stuck out to you. Just give me some highlights from your pro day tour.
So I was pretty disappointed. Uh, Thaddeus Dixon from UNC wasn't able to perform at the pro day for the Tar Heels because he was dealing with a hamstring injury. It dates back to the combine. So Marcus Allen, their other cornerback, had a nice day in coverage drills, but I wouldn't say either anybody really stood out at UNC. Later on that day on Monday, Duke just an impressive showcase. Brian Parker, who's moving from tackle to center, is a guy that I think could be on the Panthers' radar. He's moving pretty well. He played center in high school, but played tackle throughout his college career. Now he's moving back to center because of arm length and other obstacles that he would face at tackle. He looked pretty good snapping the ball and running off the ball. But I got to talk to you about their defense. There are 3 studs that are coming from that defense. There's a corner who's getting second round buzz. He's a little bit undersized. He's about 5'9" and change, 185 pounds, but he's extremely muscular. He's got that dog to him. That's what everybody talked about at Duke. He really is a guy that's kind of nasty and plays with the confidence of a guy built like JC Horn, who is significantly bigger and longer than him. He can play outside. He can play safety. He can play nickel corner. That's where I think he'll end up being. He's got phenomenal ball skills. He put on a show during position drills, just catching everything thrown his way as he backpedaled and braked. He had 7 interceptions in his college career. I think he's a guy that should be on the radar for day 2 at nickel corner. And then Vincent Anthony, who is an edge rusher, who might have the best physique I've ever seen in a pro day, just was terrific. He ran a 7-second 3 cone, which is awesome for him. He's got good bend, movement in space. If they wait till the later rounds just because of how the board falls out, he would make a lot of sense. And then the guy that I think is my sleeper of this draft so far is Wesley Williams, who is a defensive end in either a 4-3 or a 3-4. He's got a really unusual body type. He's 6'4", 258 pounds. He can rush from inside. He can rush from outside. If you're waiting to draft an Ashawn Robinson replacement, he makes a lot of sense. You can put a lot more weight on his frame. He's played anywhere between excuse me, my nose. 240 and 280, he said yesterday. He had a 7.13 cone, which is great for that size and that position. He can play the big DN spot. He can play a regular 4-3 look. You can move him inside to 3 technique. He is a guy that I think if you're going to take a late round flyer on an interior pass rusher or a guy who you want to move around the board, he makes a ton of sense. You brought up Jalen Kilgore at South Carolina. He's a guy who is being either situated as a box safety or a nickel corner, depending on who the analyst is. To me, he's just a football player. He makes a lot of sense. He's kind of similar to Trayvon Merrick in that he can kind of move around the secondary, play some dime linebacker. He's 6'1", 210 pounds. I think you could probably add 5 to 10 more pounds to his weight, and he can play safety. I also think he can float around the middle. He can play some corner. He was really impressive. And those are the 4 guys so far that I've really just been like, oh, okay, for the Panthers. I think heading into NC State, Justin Joly is a guy that is kind of a little bit, just from the standpoint of he's a tight end. He's kind of a Janu Smith type. I mean, he's not as athletic, but he's the guy that you can kind of move around. He was highly productive at NC State. And then Damon Claiborne is a guy that I'm looking forward to seeing at Wake Forest. He's a pretty good running back, got really good speed. He just wasn't very productive during his college career. And so I'm interested to see how scouts kind of look at him.
The Panthers haven't drafted a Duke player before, right?
Correct. They haven't drafted a Wake Forest player either.
Wow. So some things, some records, some history might be made this NFL draft. All right, Mike, anything else before we get out of here?
Nope, just keep an eye out for the Axis Panthers newsletter. I'm going to be traveling to Phoenix for the owners' meetings. I've got some pretty strong feelings about the Browns' proposal for trading 5 years in the future that I'm going to include in my Axis Panthers newsletter, which you can sign up for on Trial.com. We'll have a ton of coverage from out there. The NFC coaches breakfast is set for Monday, so we'll talk to Dave Canals. We'll get an update on everything that's going on in his brain, hopefully. And we'll see you next Wednesday, on the Processing Blue podcast.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to CharlotteObserver.com for all of your Panthers needs. Mike, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
Zach, I don't want a sandwich. I want a wrap.